The ballroom shimmered as though it had been carved out of crystal itself. Music swelled from the string quartet in the corner, echoing beneath vaulted ceilings where the great chandelier glowed like a captive constellation. Executives in tailored suits and gowns that whispered luxury drifted across polished marble, their laughter bright and easy, their champagne glasses lifted as though the world belonged only to them. Victoria Chen stood pressed against a marble pillar, the stem of her own glass trembling faintly between her fingers. The black cocktail dress she wore clung a little too tightly at the shoulders. She had borrowed it from a friend at the office, praying no one would notice it wasn't hers. Each sip of air carried the scent of roses, cologne, and money. She tried to smile, to look like she belonged, but all she could think of was the stack of medical bills waiting at home and the diner shift she had to cover that weekend. Her vision blurred for just a moment as she scanned the sea of glittering faces. She blinked hard, willing herself steady. She could not faint here, not in front of them, not in front of him. Adrien Blackwell, the company's elusive CEO, was somewhere in the room. She could almost feel the weight of his presence, though she hadn't seen him yet. The room swayed gently, then more insistently. Her stomach tightened with hunger. She had skipped lunch to meet a deadline, and breakfast had been nothing but weak coffee. The champagne in her hand burned sour in her throat. She set it down on a nearby tray, fingers trembling. The lights above fractured into dizzying shards. The glass slipped. Shattered crystal rang out against marble. Gasps rippled through the air, but Victoria never heard the end of them. Darkness swept across her vision like curtains being drawn. Her knees buckled, the world tilting into nothing. But she did not hit the gross, and instead, there was warmth. Solid, unyielding, steady arms folding around her as though she weighed no more than a whisper. Voices blurred. Somewhere distant, someone barked for space, for quiet. And then, silence. When Victoria's eyes fluttered open again, the world was softer. No chandelier, no crowd, no music. Only the quiet hum of a desk lamp and the subtle scent of expensive cologne. She lay cradled against a broad chest, the steady thrum of a heartbeat beneath her ear. Her gaze traveled upward. Adrien Blackwell was looking down at her, his steel-gray eyes filled with something she had never seen before. Fear. "Easy," he murmured, voice low velvet threaded with steel. His tuxedo jacket was gone, his bow tie undone, the top buttons of his shirt loosened as though he had been in too much of a hurry to care. "You fainted." Heat flared in her cheeks, half embarrassment, half shock. I'm fine," she whispered. "You're not fine," Adrien countered quietly. His thumb brushed her wrist as though grounding her. "The medic checked you over. You need food, not champagne." He glanced toward the desk where a tray sat with sandwiches and fruit, food she didn't remember arriving. "Eat first, argue later." Her throat tightened. Pride warred with exhaustion, but the truth slipped out before she could catch it. I haven't eaten since morning. Money's tight. I'm working 2 jobs, but my mom's medical bills." Her voice cracked. "It's been hard." Adrien's jaw tightened, his expression raw in a way she had never thought possible from the untouchable CEO. He didn't offer platitudes. He didn't look away. He simply held her a little closer, as though bracing her against the weight she carried alone. And then, from the corner of her vision, light flared. A quick, sharp burst. Camera flash. The office door stood ajar, a shadow lingering in the hallway. Someone had seen this, him. Adrien's arm tightened protectively around her. "Let them," he said under his breath, gaze never leaving hers. For the first time in months, Victoria felt truly seen. Not as an underpaid marketing coordinator, not as the woman in the borrowed dress, but as someone who mattered, someone worth catching before the fall. The next morning, sunlight streamed through glass walls of Meridian Industries and turned the polished floors into mirrors. Victoria Chen kept her head down as whispers followed her through the lobby. She felt eyes linger too long, conversations drop when she walked by, the faint click of phones being lowered as if screens had just been hidden. The memory of that flash in the office doorway haunted her. Someone had seen her in Adrien Blackwell's arms. Someone wanted the story to spread. She reached her desk to find a sealed envelope waiting. Her name was written in perfect block letters. Inside was a note with no signature. Stop playing the hero's damsel. Some stories don't end with happily ever after. Her hands trembled, but she folded the note and tucked it deep into her bag. She would not give whoever wrote it the satisfaction of fear. At noon, she was summoned upstairs. The executive floor always felt like foreign ground, but today, every step carried the weight of fate. Adrien's office doors opened before she could knock. He was waiting, jacket off, sleeves rolled as if he had been pacing. He gestured for her to sit, but she remained standing, arms crossed over her chest. "I want to thank you for last night," she said carefully. "But if people saw it could look—" "It will look however they choose to twist it," Adrien cut in, his voice firm but his eyes soft. "But I won't apologize for catching you when you collapsed." His words disarmed her. Still, she kept her guard. "What do you want from me?" "What I should have offered long ago," Adrien replied. He crossed to his desk and slid a folder toward her. "Senior Marketing Director, you've earned it. I won't ensue you by pretending otherwise." Victoria stared at the contract. A higher salary than she had ever imagined, full benefits, a signing bonus that would erase the most urgent of her mother's bills. Her heart hammered, torn between relief and suspicion. "If I accept, they'll say it's because of last night. They'll say I traded one kind of survival for another." Adrien's gaze never wavered. "Then let them. I'll make this clear in front of the entire board if I have to. You deserve this because you're the most brilliant strategist we have, and if you refuse, you'll still have my protection, whether you want it or not." The room tightened with silence. She felt both trapped and liberated at once. The walls seemed to pulse with tension, his presence overwhelming but steady. Finally, she whispered, "You're risking everything." Adrien stepped closer, his shadow falling across her. "Victoria, you're not the risk. You're the reason I'm willing to take them." Before she could respond, a sharp knock rattled the door. Derek Morrison stepped inside without waiting for permission, his smile too casual, his eyes gleaming with something that made her stomach twist. "Sorry to interrupt," he said, though he looked anything but. "Just wanted to congratulate Miss Chen on her sudden promotion." Victoria froze, pulse racing. Adrien's expression darkened, a storm barely contained. She realized then that the game had already begun, and whoever had taken that photograph wanted far more than gossip. They wanted to destroy them both. And for the first time, Victoria wondered if catching her had placed them in far greater danger than letting her fall. The city glittered like 1,000 restless stars as Victoria stepped onto the terrace outside Adrien's penthouse. The night air was cool against her flushed cheeks, and for a moment she let the skyline distract her from the storm gathering at her back. She had signed the promotion contract earlier that day, but Derek's mocking grin still lingered in her thoughts. Someone was watching, someone was waiting, and every step forward felt like a step deeper into a labyrinth with no clear exit. Adrien joined her, 2 takeout boxes in hand. He set them on the small table and poured wine into crystal glasses, but his gaze never left her. "You look like you're carrying the whole city on your shoulders," he said quietly. She forced a smile. "Maybe I am." They ate in silence for a while, the sound of traffic far below rising and falling like a tide. The tension between them was sharp, but not fragile. It was a cord pulling them closer, no matter how much she told herself to resist. Adrien leaned back, studying her as though she were a puzzle he had been trying to solve for years. "I know what they're saying," he admitted finally. "I've seen the way Derek looks at you, the way people whisper when we pass." His jaw tightened. "I can fight the board. I can fight the media. But I can't fight you if you don't want this." Victoria set her glass down, her hands trembling slightly. "You don't understand. Every choice I make is already judged before I've made it. If I excel, it's because of you. If I stumble, it's because of me. And now there are threats, notes. Someone doesn't just want to ruin me. They want to ruin you too. Adrien rose from his chair, closing the distance between them. The city lights cast silver into his steel-gray eyes, and for the first time she saw something other than control. She saw fear. Then let them try. They'll learn I'm not so easy to destroy. And neither are you. Her breath caught as his hand brushed hers, tentative, almost reverent. Adrien, she whispered, warning and plea tangled together. Victoria, he murmured, his voice low and dangerous. Tell me to stop, and I will. But if you don't, then I need you to understand something. I didn't catch you that night because it was my duty. I caught you because I couldn't do anything else. Because somewhere between passing your office and reading your reports, I stopped seeing you as an employee and started seeing you as the one thing I couldn't risk losing. The confession wrapped around her like heat, like danger. She should have stepped back. Instead, she lifted her chin and met his gaze head on. You're playing with fire, she said. Then let it burn, Adrien whispered, and before she could protest, his lips brushed hers. It was not the kiss of a boss claiming possession. It was the kiss of a man laying down his armor. The sound of a shutter clicking snapped through the night like a bullet. Victoria's eyes flew open. On the street below, a figure stepped back from the shadows, camera still raised. Adrien pulled away just enough to follow her gaze. His expression hardened into steel. They wanted proof, he said grimly. Now they have it. Victoria's heart pounded. The city around them suddenly felt like a stage, and she realized their story had been pulled into a battle she had never agreed to fight. A battle where love might be the most dangerous weapon of all. Morning light filtered through the blinds of Victoria's corner office, but instead of warmth, it brought a chill. On her desk lay the business section of the city's most ruthless newspaper. Her photograph filled half the page. She was laughing, her hand resting on Adrien's arm as they left a restaurant 2 nights earlier. The headline struck like a dagger. CEO's secret romance, love, or leverage. The article was worse than the headline. Every sentence dripped with suspicion, painting her as a woman who had used her charm to secure a promotion she hadn't earned. Anonymous sources from inside the company hinted at late-night meetings, whispered about favoritism, and claimed she had Adrien wrapped around her finger. Her stomach knotted as she reread the words. Each Lisa, twisting her achievements into weapons against her. Campaign successes were framed as stolen credit. Late nights at the office were spun into seduction. Even her mother's medical bills were dragged into the light, painted as a motive for manipulation. Victoria dropped the paper, bile rising in her throat. The phone on her desk buzzed once, a text from an unknown number. End it now, or the next story won't just be about your reputation. It will be about your family. Her blood turned cold. She wanted to believe it was an empty threat, but the precision of the first article told her otherwise. Someone had access, someone had an agenda, and someone wasn't afraid to go further. A knock sounded at the door before she could hide the paper. Adrien stepped in, his presence filling the room as always. But today his confidence seemed dimmed. He saw the paper immediately. Their eyes met. You've read it, he said. His voice was low, steady, but she could hear the anger simmering beneath. How can I not believe it when every detail lines up? She whispered, struggling to keep her voice from breaking. The promotion, the photographs, the timing. To them, I'm not qualified, I'm just convenient. Adrien closed the distance between them, his jaw set in grim determination. You think I handed you that promotion because I wanted to get close to you? Do you honestly believe I'd risk this company? Risk you for something that shallow? I don't know what to believe, she admitted, tears stinging her eyes. Because believing in you means gambling everything I have left. And if I lose, I don't just lose my job. I lose myself. For a long moment, the silence between them felt heavier than the marble walls surrounding them. Then Adrien pulled out his phone. His next words cut through the quiet like a blade. If the only way to prove this isn't about power is to walk away from mine, then that's what I'll do. Before she could stop him, he dialed a number and spoke with crisp finality. Draft my resignation letter, effective immediately. I'll address the board this afternoon. He ended the call, his eyes never leaving hers. Victoria's breath caught. Adrien, no. This company is your life. No, he said softly, stepping close enough that she could feel the heat of his conviction. You are my life. Everything else is noise. Before she could form an answer, the lights in her office flickered, the computer on her desk flashing once before going black. A surge of static crackled through the room. On her darkened screen, a single message appeared in bold white letters. You were warned. Adrien's arm wrapped around her instinctively, pulling her against him. The office that had always felt safe now seemed like a trap. And in that moment, Victoria realized this was no longer about gossip or reputation. Someone was playing a far deadlier game, and she and Adrien had just become the primary targets. The corridors of Meridian Industries felt colder than usual as Victoria walked beside Adrien that evening. Every flicker of light seemed sharper. Every echo of footsteps in the empty halls stretched too long, like whispers chasing them. The warning on her computer screen had been wiped clean by the time IT arrived, but the terror it left behind clung to her. Whoever had sent it was watching, and whoever they were, they had access to the company's systems. Adrien escorted her into the secure conference room where Naomi from IT was already waiting. Naomi was sharp-eyed and calm under pressure, a woman Victoria had always trusted. Tonight, Naomi had lines of code dancing across her laptop screen and a file of security reports stacked neatly beside her. I traced the intrusion, Naomi said without preamble. The logins were masked, routed through multiple servers, but they all lead back to one set of credentials, Derek Morrison's. Victoria's chest tightened. Derek had been circling her since the gala, pretending. G interest, always standing too close. She remembered his smirk when he interrupted her meeting with Adrien. It made sense now. He had motive, he had access, and he was reckless enough to think he could get away with it. But Naomi wasn't finished. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, pulling up surveillance footage from the night of the gala. There's something else. When you fainted, security cameras caught Derek near the service hall. He wasn't helping. He wasn't even surprised. He was texting. Adrien's eyes hardened. He knew something was going to happen. Victoria shivered. You think he wanted me to faint? Or wanted the moment caught? Naomi zoomed in on the footage, and for a second the screen revealed something chilling. Derek wasn't alone. A man in a maintenance jacket passed him a small device, then disappeared into a blind spot of the camera. The image was grainy, but deliberate. Whoever it was knew exactly where to walk to avoid being seen again. Adrien leaned forward, his voice low. This wasn't just a smear campaign. This was planned, coordinated. The walls seemed to close in. Victoria's mind raced. First the photos, then the article, now a direct threat. This wasn't office politics anymore, it was sabotage. Why me? She whispered. What do they gain by destroying me? Naomi hesitated, then pulled up another file. Because of this. She turned the laptop so they could see. It was an old compliance ledger flagged with a name that made Victoria's breath catch. Chen. The record showed a dormant trust connected to the company's founder, set to activate if a Chen descendant reached an executive role. Adrien stiffened but said nothing. His silence was answer enough. Victoria's pulse roared in her ears. You knew. I suspected, Adrien admitted, his voice rough. I found fragments of the record months ago, but I didn't tell you because I wasn't certain. And I didn't want to burden you until I had proof. Her world tilted again, but this time it wasn't hunger or exhaustion. It was betrayal mixing with fear. Someone was trying to force her out before that trust could trigger. Someone was willing to ruin reputations, hack systems, even risk lives. Adrien reached for her hand, but she pulled back. You should have told me, she said, her voice shaking. Before he could answer, the overhead lights flickered once more. The conference room door clicked shut behind them, locked from the outside. Then a voice crackled through the intercom, distorted but sharp. You were warned, it said again, this time with chilling clarity. Next time, we won't miss. Victoria's heart pounded as the lights went dark. For the first time, she realized the enemy inside Meridian wasn't just after her career. They were after her life. The showcase ballroom was alive with cameras and chatter the night of the product launch. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead, a mirror of the one that had hung above Victoria the night she fainted. Every spotlight gleamed off polished marble, and every laugh sounded too sharp, too staged. For Victoria, the air carried more than the scent of roses and champagne. It carried danger. Adrien had insisted she stand beside him when he introduced their latest campaign. To the world it looked like triumph. To her it felt like bait. She could feel eyes burning into her from across the room, whispers following her like shadows. Derek lingered near the back, smirking with the confidence of someone who thought he had already won. Halfway through Adrien's speech, Victoria's gaze drifted upward. At first she thought it was her nerves, but then she saw it. One of the chandeliers wasn't steady. Its chain trembled as though touched by invisible hands. A bolt shifted. Her stomach dropped. She didn't think. She ran. In front of hundreds of investors and reporters, she hurled herself toward Adrien and shoved him aside just as a metal plate screeched loose. A rain of bolts clattered against the stage where he had been standing. Gasps tore through the crowd. For a heartbeat, the entire ballroom froze. Security rushed forward, dragging them off stage. Adrien caught Victoria in his arms, his face pale with fury and fear. "You saw it before it fell," he whispered, gripping her shoulders. "You saved my life." She shook, adrenaline still flooding her veins. "Someone wanted you under it. Someone wanted a disaster caught on camera." Naomi appeared moments later, laptop already in hand. She had pulled the surveillance feed before anyone else could bury it. The screen showed Derek walking near the service entrance earlier in the day, but the real horror was the second figure behind him. A man in a maintenance jacket paused directly under the faulty chandelier. He crouched, his hands working quickly at the bolts. Then he walked straight into a camera blind spot without looking up, as if he knew the exact layout. Adrien's jaw tightened. This was deliberate, coordinated. Victoria felt the weight of every eye in the room, every flash of every camera. To the audience it looked like chaos, maybe an accident, but she knew better. They had turned her fainting into gossip. Now they had tried to turn a launch into blood. When the ballroom cleared and silence returned, Adrien pulled her into his office. His voice was low, shaking with emotion. "Victoria, whoever they are, they're not just after your reputation. They're after both of us." She met his eyes, her pulse still unsteady. "Then we fight together. But tell me everything. No more half-truths. No more silence." Adrien closed his eyes for a long moment, as if surrendering a war he had been fighting alone. When he opened them, there was no CEO mask left, only a man with fear and love carved into every line of his face. "There's something about your family," he said quietly. "Something tied to this company's very foundation. And I think that's why they won't stop until you're out of the way." Before Victoria could ask what, he meant, the office phone rang. Naomi's voice crackled through, urgent and strained. "You both need to see this. They're not trying to hide anymore. They just sent me footage directly." The screen lit up, and there it was. A replay of the chandelier breaking free. Only this time, the video had been edited. It ended with Victoria pushing Adrien out of the way, and the words superimposed in red. "She wants him dead." The trap was no longer in the shadows. The enemy had just declared war in the open. The boardroom of Meridian Industries had never felt more like a battlefield. 12 directors sat in polished leather chairs, their faces tight with calculation as Adrien placed his resignation letter on the table. The air was thick with whispers from the chandelier incident, the doctored video, and the headlines that had spread like wildfire across the city. Outside the glass walls, reporters swarmed, their cameras flashing against the building like sparks against steel. Victoria stood at the back of the room, her palms damp, her heart pounding. She wanted to disappear, but Adrien's steady gaze held her in place. He had refused to let her face this alone. Now his career, his empire, and her name were all burning in the same fire. "I will not let Meridian's future be compromised by whispers and manipulated footage," Adrien said, his voice sharp and commanding. "If removing myself restores the company's credibility, then I step aside." Gasps rippled through the room. Margaret Winters, the longest-serving board member, narrowed her eyes. "And what of this woman?" She gestured at Victoria with thinly veiled disdain. "Her presence is at the center of this chaos. If she remains, so does the scandal." Victoria's chest tightened, but something inside her snapped. She could not let them speak for her anymore. She stepped forward, the echo of her heels slicing through the silence. "With respect, this scandal exists because someone inside this company created it. They leaked private moments, doctored footage, and tampered with safety equipment in an attempt to frame me. You think this is about romance, but it is about sabotage." The boardroom murmured in shock. Margaret's lips curved, amused but curious. "You have proof?" Victoria glanced toward the door. Naomi entered at that exact moment, holding a thick folder and a USB drive. She placed them on the table with quiet precision. "Yes," Naomi said. "We do." On the screen mounted to the wall, Naomi projected the surveillance footage. Derek's face appeared, pale and sweaty, taking instructions from a man in a maintenance jacket. Then she revealed a chain of messages pulled from a hidden server, messages that traced back to none other than Caldwell, one of the senior board members sitting at the table now. "You dare accuse me?" Caldwell's voice thundered, his hands gripping the arms of his chair. Naomi pressed another key. A recording filled the room. Caldwell's assistant panicked, confessing in clipped tones. "He told me to leak the story. He said the company couldn't afford another Chen gaining influence. He paid Derek to plant evidence. He said if Adrien's reputation cracked, the rest would fall." The room erupted. Board members turned on Caldwell, their voices sharp and furious. Caldwell tried to rise, but security was already at his side. Adrien didn't move. His eyes never left Victoria. For the first time, she saw them soften with something more powerful than anger: pride. "You saved me once under a falling chandelier," he said quietly, just for her. "Now you've saved this company." Victoria's hands trembled, but her voice was steady. "We're not safe yet. Caldwell was only one piece. Someone else gave him the reason to fear the Chen name. Someone who knows what I don't." Margaret leaned back in her chair, her sharp eyes glittering. "She's right. The attack wasn't just about destroying you, Miss Chen. It was about preventing you from discovering something." Adrien turned to Victoria, his jaw set. "It's time they know the truth," he said. "And it's time you do too." The tension in the room deepened, like the air before a lightning strike. Whatever Adrien was about to reveal would not only change her life, but might explain why she had become the center of this storm. The boardroom, the company, and even her heart seemed to hold their breath, waiting for the secret that had been buried in Meridian's walls for decades. Night draped itself over the city like a velvet curtain as Victoria followed Adrien and Naomi into the hidden archives beneath Meridian's headquarters. The elevator required 3 separate security codes and an old brass key that Adrien produced from his pocket with hands that trembled almost imperceptibly. The air below smelled of dust and ink, shelves stretching into shadow filled with records older than either of them. Naomi's flashlight beam skimmed across stacks of ledgers until she stopped at one bound in dark leather, its spine cracked with age. "This is it," she whispered. "The founder's compliance records." Adrien opened the book carefully, the pages whispering like secrets. Victoria leaned in, her heart pounding as she saw her surname written in faded ink. Chen. The entry listed a trust created decades ago by Mei-Lin Chen, one of Meridian's original co-founders. The words blurred as her breath caught. A clause tied the inheritance to one condition only: a Chen descendant must rise to executive rank through proven merit. Her knees weakened. All at once, the threats, the sabotage, the attacks made chilling sense. Someone had tried to keep her from reaching the very position Adrien had given her. Someone had been terrified that if she did, a dormant legacy would awaken. "I don't understand," she whispered, her voice cracking. I don't know this woman. I don't even know if I'm related. Adrien closed the ledger key gently. His expression was grave, but there was sorrow in his eyes too. Your mother never told you. Mei-Lin Chen was her mother. That makes you the granddaughter of Meridian's co-founder. The floor seemed to tilt beneath her. Images flashed through her mind. Her mother's weary smile, the stories of a difficult childhood, the sacrifices made without explanation. Victoria felt the ground shift as pieces of a puzzle she hadn't known existed began to lock together. Before she could speak, Naomi's laptop beeped. She had connected to the old server, trying to salvage what Caldwell's assistant had attempted to wipe. The screen filled with files, and then suddenly a message blinked into life. You should have walked away. The lights in the archive flickered. Then a recorded video began to play on Naomi's laptop without her touching a key. The image showed Victoria on the terrace with Adrien, their kiss under the city lights. But the footage had been twisted, the angle manipulated. Words appeared across the screen. She seduced the CEO to steal a fortune. Victoria's stomach turned. They're rewriting everything, she breathed. Adrien slammed the ledger shut, his voice sharp. This is no longer about scandal. This is about ownership. If they can discredit you before the board accepts your promotion, they erase the Chen line and keep the company under their control. Naomi's flashlight caught movement in the shadows. The creak of a door at the far end of the archive echoed like thunder. Footsteps, slow, deliberate. Victoria froze. Adrien moved in front of her instinctively, his body tense, ready to shield her. From the darkness, a man's voice emerged, cold and certain. You were never supposed to find this. Now that you have, I can't let you leave. The figure stepped into the beam of Naomi's light, and Victoria's breath hitched. It wasn't Derek. It wasn't Caldwell. It was someone higher, someone she never suspected. A man who had always smiled in the boardroom and offered her polite congratulations. The revelation hit harder than any headline. The enemy had not been outside looking in. He had been standing among them the entire time, waiting for the moment Victoria uncovered the truth that could change everything. The boardroom windows rattled under the weight of the storm outside as Victoria stood in the center of the long table, every eye fixed on her. The truth from the archives still clung to her skin like fire. She was the granddaughter of Mei-Lin Chen, heir to a legacy she had never known, and now the board was watching to see whether she would break or rise. Adrien sat at her side but did not speak. He had promised her this fight would be hers if she chose it, and she felt both the burden and the freedom of that promise. Naomi stood near the projector, files ready, her hands steady despite the storm raging in the city and in the company. Caldwell had already been dragged away in disgrace, but the man who had emerged from the shadows of the archive the night before now sat across the table, his face calm, his smile unshaken. Richard Hale, senior board member, the one who had always seemed quiet, supportive, almost forgettable. It was a mask. Now she saw the predator beneath it. Richard folded his hands. Let us be honest. This company cannot afford scandal. Miss Chen may be talented, but she carries with her a family name tied to an inconvenient legacy. The trust clause was outdated. It should never have survived. If we want Meridian to thrive, we must cut ties with her and move forward. The words were spoken like truth, but venom laced each syllable. Victoria's pulse thundered in her ears. She forced herself to breathe and stepped closer to the table. You talk about legacy like it's a weakness, she said, her voice low but strong. But Meridian was built by people like Mei-Lin Chen who risked everything when this company was nothing more than an idea. My family's blood runs through its foundation and no sauce. Mere campaign will erase that, not doctored videos, not collapsing chandeliers, not threats whispered in the dark. Naomi pressed a button and the screen behind Victoria lit up. Surveillance footage played, showing Derek accepting envelopes of cash from Richard's assistant, showing the maintenance jacket figure adjusting the chandelier bolts, showing the hidden server traced directly back to Richard's office. Gasps spread through the room. Richard leaned back unfazed. Evidence can be manufactured. Stories can be spun. The truth is subjective, And what matters here is perception. Investors are nervous. If you keep her, you risk everything. Adrien's chair scraped back as he rose, his voice like thunder. If perception is all you care about, then you've already lost. Because while you hide behind shadows, Victoria faces them. She has saved this company twice already. Once when she pulled me from under a falling chandelier, and again when she exposed your lies. The storm outside cracked lightning across the sky, illuminating every stunned face in the room. Victoria placed her hands flat on the table, meeting Richard's gaze head-on. "I will not run," she declared. "If Meridian wants to thrive, it will not be by silencing me. It will be by letting me lead alongside those willing to fight for truth. If you think I can be broken, then you underestimate me. And if you think Adrien and I will back down, then you have already lost." The room erupted into voices, some furious, some inspired. Richard's calm mask slipped at last, his eyes narrowing with a promise of retaliation. The vote would be called. The future of Meridian, and her life, would be decided before dawn. But as Victoria stood with Adrien's hand closing around hers, she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She was no longer the woman in the borrowed dress fainting under the chandelier. She was the storm walking into the boardroom, and nothing would ever be the same. The vote began with the storm hammering the glass window, housed like 1,000 fists. Lightning lit the boardroom in violent flashes, throwing every face into sharp relief. Names were called, voices answered one by one, some steady, some hesitant, each syllable heavy enough to shape the future of Meridian Industries. Richard Hale sat at the head of the table with his hands clasped, his lips curled in a faint smile. He believed his influence still outweighed truth, that money and fear would secure him victory. Victoria stood tall at Adrien's side, though her pulse was a roar in her ears. She refused to look away from the man who had tried to erase her, tried to destroy her, tried to kill her. When Margaret Winter's turn came, the silence was unbearable. Margaret's sharp gaze lingered on Victoria for a long moment. Then she spoke, her voice crisp and unflinching. "My vote is with Chen. Meridian belongs to those who earn it, not those who manipulate it." The tide shifted. One by one, other board members followed, some grudgingly, some with relief, until the final vote sealed Richard's fate. The count was clear. He had lost. For a heartbeat, Richard remained perfectly still. Then his smile fractured. He rose slowly, his chair scraping back across the polished floor. "You think this is over?" he said, his voice smooth and venomous. "You think exposing me erases the truth. But the truth is, people believe what they want to believe. Tomorrow's headlines will paint you as the girl who seduced her way into power. No vote will change that." Adrien stepped forward, his presence radiating fury. "Then let tomorrow's headlines come. Meridian has survived worse storms than you." Security moved in, but Richard lifted his hands in mock surrender. "Enjoy your victory," he sneered at Victoria. "But know this, you'll always carry the weight of doubt. Every success will be questioned. Every failure will be blamed on him." His gaze flicked to Adrien. "And eventually, that weight will crush you both." They escorted him out, his threats trailing behind like smoke. The doors closed, and the boardroom exhaled. Adrien turned to Victoria, his expression torn between pride and fear. "You don't have to stay in this fight. You've already proven yourself." But Victoria shook her head. The storm outside broke into a downpour, the sound steady, cleansing. "I'm not running. For years I thought I was wearing a costume every time I stepped into these halls. Tonight I finally know who I am. I am Victoria Chen, granddaughter of Mei Lin Chen, and I earned my place here. No one will take that from me." Silence followed her words, then Margaret rose from her seat. "Spoken like a true leader," she said firmly. "The board accepts you as senior marketing director and beneficiary of the Chen Trust. Meridian is stronger with you in it." Relief washed over Victoria, but it was Adrien's hand slipping into hers that steadied her trembling heart. He leaned close, his voice barely a whisper meant for her alone. You caught me tonight, Victoria. Not just from a falling chandelier, but from losing myself to fear. I don't want a company if it means losing you. Tears blurred her vision, but she smiled through them. And I don't want a legacy if it means standing alone. We do this together. Always. Later, as the storm faded and the city lights glowed against wet streets, Adrien led her back to the terrace where their first kiss had been stolen by a camera. This time there were no flashes, no shadows, only them. He dropped to one knee, rain still clinging to his hair, his eyes burning with unshakable devotion. Victoria Chen, he said, his voice raw and unguarded. You changed everything the night you fell and I caught you. Will you choose me, not as your boss, not as your shield, but as the man who will fight beside you for the rest of our lives? Her answer came without hesitation, steady and certain. Yes. 1,000 times, yes. He rose, pulling her into his arms as the city stretched out before them. The storm had passed, the shadows had scattered, and for the first time in years Victoria felt the weight on her shoulders lift. She was no longer the outsider looking through glass walls. She was the woman who had been tested by fire and had chosen love and truth in equal measure. Their kiss that night was not a scandal, not a secret, not a weapon. It was a promise. And as lightning faded into dawn, Victoria knew this was the true beginning of her story. Not the fainting, not the whispers, not the threats. The real story was that sometimes the fall is only the start. What matters is who catches you and who stays to face the storm by your side.